back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for all right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the final.
Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, March 13th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, I just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So with that being said, let's get into what we are going to talk about for today. So more free agency stuff. We're going to talk about a couple of running backs. So I know Derrick Henry was one of the last running backs, or big name running backs left. And yesterday he did indeed sign with the Baltimore Ravens, so we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Joe Mixon being traded to the Houston Texans and how that helps out the Texans and their running game. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about the Texans more. We'll talk about them and the Philadelphia Eagles. Those are two teams that have made a lot of moves, so we'll talk about them. Then we'll get into a couple of wide receiver news. Deontay Johnson being traded to the Carolina Panthers from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and also Darnell Mooney signing with the Atlanta Falcons. So a couple of NFC North players joining forces. Now former NFC North players in Darnell Mooney and Kirk Cousins, of course, signing that 4-year deal. And then in the final part of the show, we'll talk about Justin Fields, because he's kind of in no man's land right now. And we'll talk about the latest with him. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about a couple of running backs. So Derrick Henry, who obviously spent his entire career up to this point with the Tennessee Titans, he signed with the Baltimore Ravens. And there was some mutual interest between both sides. The Ravens actually did try to acquire him at the trade deadline, and the Titans didn't allow it, or didn't want to do that. So ends up signing with them on a 2-year, $16 million deal, potentially worth up to $20 million, with $9 million guaranteed in the first year. The biggest thing is the fact that he's going to be joining Lamar Jackson. And, you know, Lamar Jackson, his playmaking ability, especially running the football, I mean, that's going to be a problem for a lot of teams. That is going to be a matchup nightmare, having to deal with both of those guys in the same backfield. The read option is going to be a problem, because you got Derrick Henry, who, still got some good football left, I think, in the right situation, and this is the right situation for him. And then, of course, Lamar Jackson coming off an MVP season. Now you're pairing him with Derrick Henry. I mean, this is going to be fascinating to watch for next season. But when it comes to Derrick Henry, he's rushed for over 1,000 yards in 5 of his past 6 seasons and led the NFL in rushing in 2019 and 2020. He finished second in the NFL last season with 1,167 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns. And the Titans, their offensive line was not very good. And there were a couple of games where Derrick Henry really couldn't do much. And, some people were saying how Derrick Henry was washed, and I mean, listen, he's 30 years old, and, he's starting to, he's on the other side now. But like I said, I think he's still in the right situation. He's still got some good football left. Henry led the NFL with 937 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns in the first 8 weeks of the 2021 season, and then he suffered that foot injury. I do remember that. He was named to the Pro Bowl for the fourth time in his career in 2021. He was selected by the Titans in the second round of the 2016 draft out of Alabama. He won the Heisman Trophy and a national championship in 2015. And he's been consistent. Again, injuries, like in 2021, that hurt his season, but again, still got close to 1,000 yards. And like I said, in the right situation, he could still be productive, and I think this is one of those situations. And the other thing too is, he could, he's still going to get a decent workload, but now you have Lamar Jackson, who's going to take some of the pressure off of him. Lamar Jackson's going to carry the ball, throughout games, and again, if Derrick Henry needs a break, the Ravens, they have some running backs that can come in and give him a break as well. We'll see. What happens with Keaton Mitchell. Obviously he tore his ACL, so hopefully he bounces back. I think they still have Justice Hill. I know Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins were free agents. Gus Edwards went and signed with the Chargers. But, listen, this is an upgrade over what the Ravens have had. And again, Gus Edwards did well for them. But, with Derrick Henry now, it's again, he's 30, but like I said, he's still got some good years left in him. And the bottom line is this, you go back to the AFC Championship game, Ravens only ran the ball 6 times. That can't happen with Derrick Henry. You're going to give Derrick Henry the ball. I'm excited to see, what these two can accomplish together between Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. Again, I think it's a good fit, and again, it's going to be a matchup nightmare for opposing defenses. So I'm looking forward to see what they can do together. And, so that's one thing that happened. Then another thing that happened was Joe Mixon going to the Texans. Now, the Bengals were going to flat out release him, but then the Texans came in and said, hey, we could take him off your hands. And they ended up trading for him. I don't know what the specific return was for the Bengals. I'm going to look that up right now. But yeah, so the Texans ended up acquiring him, and they lost Devin Singletary. He signed with the Giants. So they only had Dameon Pierce. And Dameon Pierce is coming off of a disappointing season. He took a step back. He had a promising rookie season, but I guess, again, took a step back. They ended up getting Devin Singletary, bringing him in. And, Singletary actually had his best season. Now he's with the Giants. But, yeah, so the Texans, they went out and they got Joe Mixon because, again, Joe Mixon was going to end up getting released anyways. So they find a replacement for Singletary. And obviously the Bengals, they brought in Zach Moss, and you still got you got Chase Brown, who they drafted. So that's going to be their new backfield. And the Texans are getting Joe Mixon. So trying to see if they have the return. Of course, I go on ESPN, it doesn't have it. So I'm not 100% sure what the return was for it, but I'm assuming it's, some kind of draft compensation. But Mixon's coming off of a decent year with the Bengals. I know the Bengals, they weren't a great rushing team in 2023, but his numbers are okay. He had 9 touchdowns. He had over 1,000 yards rushing in 2023. And like I said, they did agree to a deal with Zach Moss, the Bengals. So, that he's going to end up being his replacement. Houston's rushing attack in 2023 ranked 28th in yards per game, only 92.7. And Mixon spent the past 7 seasons with the Bengals, starting 88 of 97 appearances and making 1 Pro Bowl. He's had 4 1,000-yard rushing seasons and threw a touchdown pass in the Super Bowl against the Rams. Again, he's, getting up there in age in terms of running backs, a little younger than Derrick Henry. But, I think he could still be productive with the Texans. Again, he joins Dameon Pierce in the backfield there. So we'll see what ends up happening. But I mean, I think that's a decent move for the Texans. I think Mixon can still, again, like Derrick Henry, he's still got, you know, some good football left in him. I don't know how much. I mean, because again, he's on the older side when it comes to running backs. But I think and especially with the Texans, they're another team. I mean, they're kind of a different team than the Ravens are. The Texans are going to throw it. The Ravens are going to be a team that's going to run first. Even though in 2023, Lamar Jackson had better weapons around him, so he threw it a little bit more. But yeah, I think when I look at the Texans, I think of them more as a pass first team. But you bring in Mixon, and I think he could do all right with them. So we'll see what happens there. But again, I think the bigger headline of the two is Derrick Henry going to the Ravens. And it's just amazing how all the running backs, they just are trading places. Well, not really trading. Well, they're going to different places. I mean, they're not really like trading with each other, but yeah, I mean, all the big names are off the board now, pretty much, when it comes to the running backs, unless I'm missing somebody. I think Dalvin Cook is still. I mean, Dalvin Cook is still a big name, but I don't know if he's really gonna. I don't know what his situation is. If someone's gonna pick him up, because I don't think he's still with the Ravens. Because I was trying to look into like what his situation is, and I couldn't really find anything. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, all the big names are gone, are off the board. Down Derrick Henry is. Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, Swift. Yeah, that's it. Everybody's pretty much in a new situation, and it's going to be interesting to see how everybody does. Again, love the Derrick Henry signing for the Ravens. Josh Jacobs going to the Packers, I thought was, well, I mean, that was the biggest surprise. In my opinion, was that because that kind of just came out of nowhere, and then you thought, oh, it's going to be Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones. Well, that's not the case. So. Aaron Jones ends up going to the Vikings. Barkley, you kind of got the sense that Philadelphia was going to end up being his destination based off of, supposedly them having mutual interest. Well, then he ends up signing there. I thought Tony Pollard going to the Titans was interesting. I don't know how that's going to work out. Swift going to the Bears, I thought that was a good move for them. Now we just got to figure out what they do at the quarterback position, and we'll talk about them at the end of the show. But Austin Eckler going to the Commanders. That's another one that was interesting. The Chargers obviously getting Gus Edwards, and I'm guessing they'll probably draft a running back. But we'll see. I mean, this offseason has gotten off to a crazy start. I mean, especially day one. Not as many moves as the first day, but still things happened yesterday that we'll talk about. Actually, speaking of the Ravens, I'll bring up a signing that they made, or a signing the Steelers made. They signed Patrick Queen to a 3-year, $41 million deal. Obviously, he was a part of their linebacker core. And now he joins a rival. I thought that was a good signing for the Steelers. But like I said, we're going to get into actually the Eagles and the Texans. We'll talk about some of their signings in the next segment. There's some signings that I just forgot to mention. Like for the Texans, well, I mean, we'll get into it. But yeah. But there's some signings that I kind of missed just because, again, there's just been so much going on now. But yeah, like I said, in the next segment, we'll talk about the Texans and the Eagles as well, because I think they've done well in the offseason. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about Derrick Henry signing with the Ravens, Mixon going to the Texans. How do you think they're going to fit with their new teams? I mean, I think Derrick Henry's going to do well. He's in a good spot, and I you know what? And I think Joe Mixon will do okay. I think he's in a good situation with the Texans as well. The Texans are building something, and yeah. So we'll talk about the Texans more, And we'll talk about the Eagles as well when we come back from our first break of the show. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. Some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about the Eagles and the Texans. We'll talk about the moves that they've made so far in the offseason. We'll start off with the Eagles. So they made a couple of more signings yesterday. So they actually brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They signed him to a 3-year deal worth up to $33 million. He had a great season for them in 2022, tying for a league-high 6 interceptions despite missing 5 games due to injury. So, and what was the issue with the Eagles last year? Was their defense. And what they've been able to do, you re-sign Brandon Graham. Obviously, Fletcher Cox retiring does hurt, but you bring back C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You bring in Bryce Huff from the Jets. You sign him to a 3-year contract, $51.1 million, 10 sacks with the Jets in 2023. I mean, they're doing what they can to try to improve this defense. So I've liked what they've been able to do. Also, the fact that they got Saquon Barkley as well. I know people will talk about how it was definitely an overpay, especially with the running back position. But listen, you bring in Saquon Barkley, I think obviously he's an instant upgrade over what they've had. I mean, 2022 they had Miles Sanders and Boston Scott. They still got Kenneth Gainwell. And then, of course, I think he's an upgrade over DeAndre Swift. But even though Swift had a good year. But, now he's just got to go out there and prove it. I mean, this is a guy that's dealt with injuries. And, that's something that can definitely happen. Injuries always happen, unfortunately. And I don't want to see injuries, continue to occur. But that's football. It's going to happen. So, but listen, I know being a Giant fan, it hurts that it stings that he went to the Eagles. But you know what? It's a much better situation than with the Giants. And again, I think the Giants did the right thing. And I like the moves that the Giants made too. But also another move that they made as well, the Eagles signed Devontae Parker to a 1-year contract. I want to see if the specifics of the deal. So 1 year, $4.69 million. So he's kind of going to be brought in to be like that third wide receiver, which I don't think is a bad move. He's kind of going to step in and take over, that Julio Jones, Quez Watkins role. I mean, the Eagles have a ton of weapons, and especially like bringing in Barkley now. You have A.J. Brown, you got Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon coming out of the backfield. I think Devontae Parker being a number 3 wide receiver, again, it adds depth, and, he could still make plays here and there. Again, I mean, back when he was with the Dolphins, you thought, hey, this is going to be the next, really good receiver, but that really didn't turn out to be the case. At least when he was with the Dolphins, he was good, but at least for 1 year he was good. But then he spent some time with the Patriots and now with the Eagles. I mean, again, I think him being that number 3 wide receiver, I don't think that was a bad move either. So yeah, I mean, I've liked what the Eagles have been able to do. Again, ultimately, it's going to come down to, Jalen Hurts stepping up, and not turning the ball over as much as he did. The defense has to improve, and I think they've been able to do that. So we'll see how this all translates. Again, you got new coordinators, you got Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. So I think the Eagles are going to be good again next year. I don't think we're going to see a late season collapse. They have a ton of talent on this team, so it's really hard to see them, coming out flat and just not having a good year next year. I think they are going to be back to being that team. I don't know if they're going to be as good as they were in 2022, but I think they're going to be back to being, a good team. And again, it's going to come down to them and Dallas for the division, in my opinion. So, but yeah, those are all the Eagles moves. Then I also wanted to talk about the Texans because they made a lot of signings on defense. So one of the signings that I failed to mention was they signed Denico Autry over from the Titans. So he agreed to a 2-year deal, $20 million, guy they added to their defensive line. He had a career high in sacks in 2023 with 11.5, again, with the Titans. He's 34 years old, but, listen, 11.5 sacks is not too shabby. And, again, this is coming off of them losing Jonathan Grenier to the Vikings. So they bring him in. They also brought in Azeez Al-Shaair from the 49ers. So he reunites with the D'Amico Ryans linebacker. He signed a 3-year deal, $34 million. So they bring him in. And then they also brought in Danielle Hunter as well from the Vikings. The Vikings, they replaced him with Grenier. They brought in Van Ginkel. So now he goes to the Texans. So the Texans have really revamped their defense. Because, again, a lot of guys, were going to be free agents. So you pair him with Will Anderson Jr., who had a great rookie season. So, I mean, I like the moves they made, strengthen the defense. And then another thing they did was, they also, brought back guys like Dalton Schultz and Kymie Fairbairn, which I talked about. They also did bring back Noah Brown, who actually had a good year for them as well. They brought him back on a 1-year deal. Again, he's a number 3 wide receiver, just like Devontae Parker. But, when guys got hurt, he stepped up. And he was making plays. So hopefully, for them, you get Tank Dell back healthy. Nico Collins had a good season. Of course, and, you have C.J. Stroud, a quarterback, who was great. So, bringing back Noah Brown, I think, was good. Listen, I like the direction the Texans are going in. I really do. And especially, revamping their defense, especially on the defensive line. I think that they are. Listen, they're gonna be a force in 2024. They're gonna be a team that gives other teams problems, and they're going to be facing the best of the best. They're going to be facing the Bills. They're going to be facing the Ravens again. They're going to be facing the Chiefs. So we'll see how it goes. Listen, they already beat Joe Burrow and the Bengals in Cincinnati. Now, again, they played the Ravens, and it didn't go so well both times. But, again, next year's a new year. So, I'm curious to see how C.J. Stroud does, against all these teams, and the Bills too, like I mentioned. But again, he's beaten Joe Burrow, So, now we'll see, him go up against Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. I'm excited to see that. I'm guessing those games are going to be, 4:25 or, maybe prime time. So, looking forward to see, C.J. Stroud and what he can do against those quarterbacks. So, but yeah, the Eagles and the Texans, I definitely like what they've been able to do. Again, with the Eagles, defense was a problem last year, and they were able to add some guys. We'll see, C.J. Gardner-Johnson coming back into the fold. Are the Eagles going to be able to recapture that 2022 magic on defense? We'll see. Again, Vic Fangio is the defensive coordinator now. I know, listen, James Bradbury had a rough year, in the secondary. So I don't know what's going to happen with him. Darius Slay, of course, I talked about him being a possible trade candidate. So we'll see. But again, he added Bryce Huff from the Jets. I like what they were able to do. And then again, on the offensive side of the ball, obviously they re-signed one of their offensive linemen. You bring in Saquon Barkley. It's hard to imagine the Eagles are just going to, that second half collapse is going to carry into next year. But who knows? Who knows? We'll see, because a lot of stuff, came out with Nick Sirianni and, Hurts turning the ball over more. So we'll see how that all goes. But I like what they've been able to do. And again, we'll see what they do with the draft. We still got the draft coming up, So you have that. And then, of course, the Texans, again, I like what they've been able to do defensively, strengthening the defense. And, again, bringing in Joe Mixon. We'll see how that I think that'll help out the running game. But I feel like you're going to kind of get the same, similar production like you did with Devin Singletary. Mixon will be good, but I don't think, he's going to be like, how he was the first couple of years with the Bengals. So, but again, I like what these two teams have been able to do. And, for the Texans, we'll see if they can repeat as AFC South champs, even though the division is going to be competitive. You have the Colts and the Jags, to deal with. And then, of course, with the Eagles, again, for me, your competition is Dallas. And, Dallas could have very easily won both games. So, again, like what they've been able to do. So, other moves I wanted to touch upon as well. The Dolphins, they signed Jordan Poyer to a one-year contract. So, they bring him in. I know the Dolphins, they released a lot of guys on defense, so they bring in Poyer. The Saints actually made a move. They signed Chiefs linebacker Willie Gay to a one-year contract. The Giants, speaking of quarterbacks, they signed a Drew Lock to a one-year, $5 million contract, bring him in as a backup. Listen, won that game against the Eagles. Speaking of the Eagles, I think he's a decent backup. You also had Mariota signing a one-year contract with the Commanders. So again, we'll see what the Commanders end up doing on draft night. So they signed him. Jameis Winston signed with the Cleveland Browns, $8.7 million contract. That was on a one-year deal. This move I forgot to mention. So the Rams, they signed Darius Williams to a 3-year contract. He was previously with the Rams, then he was with the Jaguars. So the Rams bring him back. Also, the Seahawks, they re-signed Leonard Williams to a 3-year contract, former Giant. Dolphins also signed Jordan Brooks from Seattle, a linebacker, to a 3-year, $30 million deal. So, so those are some of the other moves that have been made over the past, couple days, or some of the days that some of them I missed. But, yeah, because it's just, again, there's been so much happening. But, so before we go to break, I just want to remind you guys again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link. That is GSMCpodcast.net. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is GSMCpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So when we come back from our second break of the show, we'll touch upon some wide receiver news, Deontay Johnson being traded from the Steelers to the Carolina Panthers. We'll also talk about Darnell Mooney signing with the Falcons, teaming up with Kirk Cousins, a former NFC North foe. So we'll get into all that when we come back, because I know there really hasn't been a lot of wide receiver stuff. I know I talked about Michael Pittman getting a new deal and T. Higgins requesting a trade. Gabe Davis signed with the Jags, but there really hasn't been a lot. But we'll talk about these two moves here when we come back from our second break of the show. So with that being said, stick around and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to talk about a few wide receiver moves regarding Diontae Johnson and Darnell Mooney. So I guess we'll talk about Diontae Johnson and the trade first, because that's how I have it in my notes. So the Steelers, they trade Diontae Johnson to the Carolina Panthers, along with a 7th-round pick in exchange for cornerback Dante Jackson and a pick swap. Diontae Johnson has spent, his entire career with Pittsburgh. And listen, the Panthers, they need to add some playmakers to help out Bryce Young. This past season, so in 2022, Diontae Johnson did not score a touchdown. The last time he scored, he did score touchdowns in 2023, but didn't score a touchdown in 2022. And it was just funny because every week it was like, the last time that he caught a touchdown pass, Ben Roethlisberger was the quarterback. So he did finally catch a touchdown. He ended up finishing with 5 touchdowns on the season, and he had 717 receiving yards. He did have over 1,000 yards back in 2021. That was Big Ben's last season. So he comes in. He's now going to be another weapon for Bryce Young, which is big. I know. Listen, Adam Thielen had a good season for them, but you're trying. You want to add more playmakers around Bryce Young. And again, I don't look at Diontae Johnson as this elite wide receiver, but I think he could definitely help out. When it comes to Bryce Young. So, the Steelers got Dante Jackson. He spent his entire career with the Panthers after being selected in the 2nd round of the 2018 draft. Started 16 games in 2023, recording no interceptions, but has 14 career interceptions overall. The Panthers are planning to trade or release Jackson before the trade with the Steelers. This fills a void for the Steelers secondary after the release of Patrick Peterson. I think really the weakness for the Steelers on their defense is probably their secondary. So, adding a corner, that's definitely huge. Especially what they've been able to do, adding Patrick Queen. And then, of course, you got the guys up front with T.J. Watt, Highsmith, Cam Hayward. So, I love the Steelers' defense, and now we just got to see, now with on the offensive side of the ball, now you trade Diontae Johnson. That's a weapon you end up losing. So we'll see. I'm guessing the Steelers are going to try to draft a receiver. You still have George Pickens, of course, Pat Freiermuth. I know Calvin Austin, who they drafted. I know he made some plays for them last year, so maybe he's going to have a bigger role. So I think that was a good trade for both teams. They were addressing needs. So the Steelers send Diontae Johnson and a 7th-round pick to the Panthers. Panthers send Dante Jackson and a 6th-round pick to the Steelers. So, interesting trade. Again, the Panthers, they something I will talk about, but how, they kind of did Bryce Young wrong, his rookie season, and, they're trying to correct that. Now, they actually did sign a couple of offensive linemen, which I think was huge. So the Panthers, they did sign Robert Hunt from the Dolphins, a guard, 5-year contract, $100 million, $63 million guaranteed. So they signed him, and then they also signed Damian Lewis, another guard from the Seahawks, to a 4-year, $53 million contract with $26.2 million guaranteed. To get better protection around Bryce Young, that's huge. And then you bring in Diontae Johnson, you add another weapon. So hopefully, the Panthers are now going in the right direction. And, Bryce Young in his second season hopefully can bounce back. Because again, You gave up a lot to get him. And, the first season was rough. And, I've talked about this division and how right now I look at the Bucks, the Saints, and the Falcons. It's going to be between those three teams. I still think the Panthers are below them. But, next year, maybe it could be different, And actually, speaking of the Buccaneers, another signing, they actually did re-sign Levante David to a 1-year, $9 million contract. So the Bucs pretty much brought back all their free agents, which I think was huge. Other than that, they really haven't added anybody else, at least not that I'm aware of. But yeah, I mean, bringing back all your key guys was huge. So let's see what else they can do potentially. So yeah, and then the other move I wanted to talk about was Darnell Mooney. So he signs with the Falcons, 3-year, $39 million deal, $26 million, fully guaranteed. Again, add another weapon for Kirk Cousins. The Bears drafted him in the 5th round back in 2020. He had a breakout season in 2021, 81 catches for 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns, but struggled over the last couple of seasons. Recorded a career-low 31 catches for 414 yards and a touchdown in 2023, and that touchdown came in Week 1 against the Packers. He led the Bears with 493 receiving yards in 2022, despite being limited to 12 games. So yeah, his totals with the Bears, 213 catches for 2,593 yards and 11 touchdowns in 60 career games. So, I mean, again, that's another weapon for Kirk Cousins. Yeah, I mean, listen, he did have promise, but last couple of years have been disappointing. I know he was somebody that I drafted in my dynasty league, and then I ended up trading him. But yeah, so first 2 seasons, so he had 61 receptions, 631 yards, 4 touchdowns. Then the following season, he had 81 catches, 81 receptions, for 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. But yeah, last couple of seasons, 40 receptions for 493 yards and 2 touchdowns, and I just told you his 2023 stats. So, but again, I mean, he's not coming in to be that number 1 wide receiver. I mean, you have Drake London, and again, we'll see how Kyle Pitts steps up, now that Kirk Cousins is in there. I mean, you would figure his production is going to go up as well. And then you got a pair of running backs that are going to be really productive. So, again, Kirk Cousins now stepping in. I'm curious to see how this Falcons offense is going to look next year. Again, right now, you look at them as, I mean, you could look at them as being the favorites. Again, I'm going to ride with Baker and the Bucs because, that's what I'm going to do. But again, I mean, you got to look at the Falcons and say, if they had better quarterback play, they're probably the team that ends up making the playoffs. Especially because, again, how the Bucs struggled in the middle of the season. Really when it started to turn around for them after that rough stretch was when they beat the Falcons in Atlanta. So, that division is going to be more competitive. I don't think you're going to see, a team didn't finish with a losing record. I thought we were going to see that, but we didn't. The division is definitely going to be better next year, especially now with Kirk Cousins being with the Falcons. And I've talked about this, this week, how Derek Carr finished the season, and the Bucs bringing all their guys back. That'll be a competitive division. Again, probably not the best division. I mean, you look at the team that Deontay Johnson just got traded from the Steelers. You look at their division. Yeah, it's that division is the best division in football because every team is going to be battling it out, and if everybody's healthy too, because obviously you got guys coming off of injuries like Deshaun Watson and Joe Burrow. Now the Steelers, they bring in Russell Wilson, and of course you got the Ravens now bringing in Derrick Henry to go along with their MVP Lamar Jackson. So that you look at that division, that's probably the most competitive division in the league. So, and then you look at the NFC South. I mean, it's going to be better, but not. You wouldn't rank them as you would not put them in the same class as the AFC North. So, But yeah, I mean, we'll see what Mooney ends up doing. Again, I mean, if you got a multi-year deal. Again, he's been disappointing the last couple of seasons. But again, I mean, Justin Fields has been hurt, and you had Tyson Bagent starting games. So, and obviously they did add DJ Moore, so obviously he was going to get most of the targets. So took targets away, and Cole Kmet really stepped up the last couple of years. So, that kind of hurt Mooney a little bit. But now, you're stepping into a situation where the Falcons got weapons as well. And I think, playing with the healthy Kirk Cousins is an upgrade for Mooney, if that's the case. So, we'll have to see. But Justin Fields is going to be a topic of conversation in the next segment. Because, again, still don't know what's going on with him and what's going to end up happening. But I don't want to talk about it too much because, we need to we got a whole nother segment. But so not really a lot of news when it comes to wide receivers. Still waiting on Calvin Ridley. I don't know what the latest is on him. Again, I know the Patriots were interested. So we'll see. I mean, let's see if there's any updates. So yeah, the Patriots. So supposedly the Patriots have submitted an offer. So I don't know if that's true or not. It's this is from NFL Rumors, because I just looked this up on Safari. So I don't know. Yeah, but Patriots reportedly pushing for Calvin Ridley, but wide receiver prefers. Oh, this team. I don't know what this team means. Oh, I gotta. So supposedly Ridley prefers to return to Jacksonville, and this is from 18 hours ago. But again, they brought in Gabe Davis, so I don't know if they're gonna want to do that. But we'll see. Because that's probably the biggest wide receiver that's left out there, unless I'm missing something. I know T. Higgins requested a trade, but he's not a free agent. Did Hunter Renfrow get cut? Because I saw. Oh, let's see. Yeah, so 1 hour ago, Hunter Renfrow being released by the Raiders. Okay, so the team will release Renfrow when the new league year begins. The veteran was set to count for $13.7 million against the cap, which is hard to justify considering 2 consecutive quiet seasons. The 28-year-old should have plenty of suitors in free agency. Okay, so that's another wide receiver headline there. So Hunter Renfrow gets cut. I mean, again, he had over 1,000 yards in 2021, but then they brought in Devontae Adams, and Josh McDaniels comes in, and Renfrow was kind of the forgotten guy. So I hope he ends up in a good situation. Also because I do have him in one of my dynasty leagues, so and that's what I was looking at. I'm again hoping he ends up in a good situation. So I just think when you add Devontae Adams, yeah, I mean Devontae Adams is going to get most of the targets, So curious to see where he could potentially end up, But yeah, so that's more wide receiver news. There you go. See, that's more breaking news there. Again, not something that is game changing, but at least it's something. So we'll see where he ends up. But yeah, and also the Raiders. I mean, they drafted Tucker, Trey Tucker, the rookie, and he was making plays for them. So yeah, it's just and then you got Michael Mayer as well. It's just there was a ton of the Raiders added a lot of guys and Renfrow kind of became the forgotten man in the offense. And I'm interested to see what they end up doing with the running back situation. Because right now Zamir White is the lead back, and did well when Josh Jacobs got hurt. So the Raiders are probably bringing somebody else to go along with Zamir White, whether it's through the draft or free agency. We'll see. But yeah, so Renfrow gets released, and we'll see where he ends up going. But let me know what you guys think about the 2 moves in this segment here. Deontay Johnson to the Panthers, a good move for the Panthers, and also for the Falcons. How do you see Mooney working out with them and Kirk Cousins? So when we come back from our final break of the show, we will discuss Justin Fields, the Justin Fields conundrum. So we'll get into that. What's the latest? And that will end off the show. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to talk about Justin Fields and what's the latest on him. So, it's interesting because it looked like he was going to, get traded. It should have happened already. You felt like it was building up to that, and then it was going to happen, but. A lot of things have happened. You had Russell Wilson going to the Steelers. That was a potential suitor. Then you had Kirk Cousins going to the Falcons. That looked like that was the most likely thing to happen. But that hasn't been the case. He's still with the Bears. Also, there was some traction gaining with the Raiders, and then they signed Gardner Minshew. So, and they might end up drafting a quarterback. So now where does that leave Justin Fields? So according to Adam Schefter, teams are still have interest, but it's possible they bring him in and they only view him as a backup rather than a starter. It's going to be interesting. And again, that scenario where, they keep Fields and they draft Caleb Williams, that's on the table. That is definitely on the table. And in my notes, one of the similar situations that you could kind of relate. Well, again, depends on what happens, but is when the Cardinals drafted Kyler Murray when they already had Josh Rosen. That's kind of like what we're going towards right now. If the Bears do draft Caleb Williams, and it seems like that's going to end up happening. So, you got the Vikings in your own division that, you bring in Sam Darnold, but maybe Fields could be someone they trade there, but I don't know if they're going to want to do. I don't think they're going to want to do that. They also want to do right by Fields, so I think they're waiting for the right opportunity. I don't know what the Seahawks are going to do. I know they. Sorry, holding back a sneeze. It happens at least once on the show. So, but of course it happens at the end. But anyways, the Seahawks. So they're bringing back Geno Smith. I know Drew Lock. He ended up signing with the Giants. Curious to see what they do. Is that maybe that was another team that I thought about? Like, oh yeah, they have Geno Smith. Would they want to bring in Justin Fields? I don't know. But that maybe is another team. But other than that, then you got the Giants. But they just signed Drew Lock, and they're probably going to draft a quarterback. So I don't know. But I think that's pretty much it. I can't really think of anyone else right now. Because again, most of the teams that were maybe linked to Fields, they made moves. Again, Russell Wilson to the Steelers, and Kirk Cousins signed to the Falcons. That was the big one. The Broncos too, but they're probably going to draft a quarterback. So I don't really know. But yeah, if teams are viewing him as a backup, I mean, what does that mean? Well, again, Justin Fields, since he's entered the league, he hasn't been spectacular. Now, again, running the football, he's been spectacular. Throwing the football, that's different. That's where he needs to improve his game, is throwing the football. And it's the Bears haven't been a great spot for him, but now they've started to improve the team. I like the direction the Bears are heading in. And when he came back from injury, the Bears, they were playing better. And there was a couple of games that they could have won that they lost down the stretch. I mean, against the Browns, they were winning and they lost that game. And then also the Lions, the second time, or no, the first time they should have won that game too. I mean, he definitely played better as the season progressed, when he came back from injury. But again, I mean, it's not like he's running the football well, but, throwing it, I mean, he's not even passing for 200 yards. He's mostly just running the football. And again, he's playing quarterback. So you want to see him, improve throwing the ball. But again, the Bears as a team did play better. And again, I think they're heading in the right direction. Right now, it's them and the Vikings battling it out for 3 and 4. Right now, I look at the Packers and the Lions. Those are going to be the two teams right now going into next year as the teams, fighting for first place in the North. Again, it all depends on. I mean, we'll see what the Bears end up doing, with Fields. And I mean, if they draft Caleb Williams, that's probably what's going to happen. But again, where does that leave Fields? I mean, are you going to have, if Fields is still on the team, are you going to have them battle it out in training camp to see who gets the starting job? It's a weird situation. But right now, yeah, I'd probably say it's right now between the Packers and the Lions. But because the Vikings right now, I mean, Sam Darnold right now is your starting quarterback. And again, I think Sam Darnold could step in and, with all the weapons that he has and the Vikings making the improvements on defense, again, the Vikings have a good roster, but I mean, I'm not expecting Sam Darnold to beat out, Jared Goff and Jordan Love and their teams for the division. Now, if they had Kirk Cousins, that's a little different. But again, Kirk Cousins is coming off an Achilles injury. And then you have the Bears, who, again, I like the direction they're going into. See, this could be another division that is going to be super competitive. But right now, I still look at the Lions and the Packers as the top two teams at this current moment. But, yeah, I mean, Justin Fields gets traded. Maybe he ends up being a backup, which, again, I bring up my Dynasty League. He's one of my other quarterbacks. I have Jordan Love, but I also have Justin Fields. So now if Justin Fields is a backup, well, I need another quarterback. So, again, this is something that, I mean, the draft is in another, what is it, at the end? It's the end of April, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So, we got from now till then, I guess. I mean, is Fields going to get I mean, I don't know at this point. I mean, unless somebody gets hurt. If somebody gets hurt, I think then you could see Fields possibly being traded. But, I mean, if there's really no suitors for him right now, and the only ones that are really, interested in bringing him in is to bring him in as a backup. So, I don't know. Would the Bears do that? Yeah, so it's at the end. So the NFL draft is between April 25th and the 27th. Okay. Yeah, so we got a while. Well, I say that now, but it's going to be here before we know it. So, but yeah, I mean, this is again something to keep an eye on, because at one point we had, there were some potential suitors. The Falcons, was really the major player, and it seemed like it was going to go in that direction. And then they go and sign Kirk Cousins to that contract. And again, older quarterback coming off an Achilles injury. So yeah, that was the major player for Fields. But yeah, I don't know. we'll see. But teams only view him as backup or want to bring him in as backup possibly. So, again, this is something that, will continue. I mean, again, of course, something could happen where, I go off the air and, he ends up getting traded. Because I know when Derrick Henry got signed, and that was when I was all wrapped up for the day, I was like, man, I wish I was still on for that. But we devoted a segment for him. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know when a deal is going to be made, but again, that scenario, which hopefully wasn't going to be possible, could become very possible, and that's having Caleb Williams and Justin Fields together. But who knows? I mean, I don't really. I mean, the Raiders. I mean, Gardner Minshew's not really looked at as the long-term answer. I mean, he's going to be a backup quarterback. I mean, he might be a bridge where, they draft one and you have him sit behind Minshew. They could do that. But Minshew wasn't brought in to be, the long-term starter. I mean, we know this, but maybe they trade for Fields. That's possible. And I don't think that'd be a bad spot for him. I mean, to go along with Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers and the young players that they have. And they're, obviously trying to improve the defense as well. They added Christian Wilkins to go along with Max Crosby, and the defense was playing better, when Antonio Pierce took over. So, I mean, that wouldn't be a bad spot for him. But you got to look at the division they're playing in, because then you're playing against the Chiefs twice. You're playing against, the Chargers with Harbaugh and Herbert. And then you got the Broncos, and we'll see what they end up doing. So I think, in terms of, who he'd be playing with, that's a good situation. But the division, yeah, it would be tough. That'd be a tough spot. But the division he's in right now is going to be tough. So I don't know. But, yeah, the NFC North that's another division. Both North divisions are going to be very competitive. I still think, I mean, like I said before, the AFC North is probably the most competitive, probably the toughest division. But you look at I said the AFC North. The AFC North, the NFC North, yeah, that's going to be a tough division too. Because again, I like the Vikings roster a lot. It's just right now, quarterback's an issue. Because you have Sam Darnold playing quarterback, and it's Jared Goff and Jordan Love right now. Right now it's their division. It's those two guys. But we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for the show for today. Again, more moves are going to be made. And once they happen, of course, I'll touch upon them. But, it's gotten off to a crazy start. I think I touched upon mostly everything. I think I did mention Mike Gesicki going to the Bengals. I did talk about that. I thought it was funny how they were posting, there were tweets, they were going back and forth, him and Jamar Chase on the Gritty celebration. I thought that was funny. Actually, also, yeah, the Dolphins, they signed Shaquille Barrett to a 1-year deal. I think I might have mentioned that. I might have not. But yeah, he agreed to a 1-year contract worth up to a max of $9 million. So they bring him over. So that's another defensive piece that they added after letting go a lot of guys. So yeah, they had Barrett and Jordan Poyer. Anything else that I missed? I think I pretty much... Yeah. No, I think I pretty much talked about all the signings. Mostly all of them. Oh, yeah, well, the 49ers actually, today, they signed Eric Kendricks to a 1-year contract. They add to their linebacking core. And actually, well, this has a... well, the reason for that is because of Dre Greenlaw and him tearing his Achilles in the Super Bowl. And at least on the post that I'm looking at, it says he won't be ready for Week 1. So, yeah, that's a... obviously, it's going to be hard to replace Dre Greenlaw. I mean, him and Fred Warner are a great combination. One of the best linebacking cores in the NFL. So, we'll But yeah, that's pretty much it with the show for today. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow, same time. And again, hopefully we get some more crazy news, and we'll break them down when they happen. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it for me. From me. I don't even know what I'm saying. That is pretty much it from me for today. That's what I was trying to say. So, yeah, so with that, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder, signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that